This afternoon's session is with Phil Brown, and we're really looking forward to listening about ISO 14001. Is that right, Phil?
Companies can actually get real benefit out of having certification to 14001. So the framework of 14001 is identical to the ISO 9001 standard for quality management. And the standard requires top management to commit to embracing the requirements of the standard, including leadership, setting improvement targets, collecting and analysing data required to monitor and measure performance against those targets. And in this presentation, I'll cover environmental regulations which companies have some areas of impact. So companies are asked to assess whether they have an impact on the environment under the various regulations. And usually companies will actually rate themselves on a numerical scale, typically 1 to 5, where 1 is minimal impact and 5 is very high. And for the areas of highest impact, the company is required to set impact reduction targets, which must be measurable, meaningful, and realistically achievable. I'll now list the regulations and outline the details of each regulation. So the areas I'm going to cover today: Control of Pollution Act, Packaging Waste Control, Control of Substances Hazardous to Health, Environmental Permission, Waste Electrical Electronic Equipment Regulations, Energy Performance of Building Regulations, F-gas regulations, waste regulations, and fire safety regulations. The reason fire safety regulations are included in this standard, as well as health and safety standards, is it's to try and minimise the effect of what happens if you get a fire. The fallout from the fire can include asbestos, for instance, which is highly toxic. So first of all, I'll talk about the Control of Pollution Act. This act is all about ensuring any company that uses a waste disposal company to transfer their controlled waste to a disposal site is registered for the transport of that controlled waste to an approved site, and that the transport company's waste carrier's license does contain details of the site or sites that it can use to dispose of that waste. And that is very important. Very often I'll go into companies and they are disposing of hazardous waste, but they haven't really checked whether the company they're using has actually got a license to do that. Packaging waste disposal. This is a regulation that at least one of my clients fell foul of. In fact, they actually invited me in to help them out when they'd been fined £12,000 for contravening the regulations. These regulations require that the company is generating at least 50 tonnes of waste a year, packaging waste a year. It has a turnover at least 2 million. And if that is the case, then they have to register with the Environment Agency and comply with the recycling targets agreed with the Environment Agency, and actually report data to the Environment Agency on level of packaging waste and how much has been recycled. The company in question I'm talking about was importing flooring material from Vietnam on wooden basis to keep that material flat. They were actually disposing of the waste wood by selling it off to a local guy who was actually selling it for firewood. So they got prosecuted by the Environment Agency. And as I say, they were fined 12,000 quid and also appeared on the front page of the local newspaper. So not very good scenario. Cost regulations. This is an area which is not only environmental, but it's also health and safety. And these regulations require companies to produce documented risk assessments for any chemicals or materials that they use and that are identified as hazardous to health. And this assessment must take into account the properties and health risks associated with using these chemicals and materials. And at this point, I must add that this does include cleaning chemicals for companies that are sort of office cleaning businesses. The form of the material, chemical, and possible levels of exposure to be expected for both the people using them and the risk to the environment have to be assessed. And in more detail, companies have to control exposure And they have to either provide, well, first of all, if they can do without the chemical material, then fair enough. But if they have to use it, they've got to control exposure to the fume and that are generated, or dust that's generated, by either providing dust and fume extraction equipment, or, and sometimes, and PPE equipment. And PPE, as we all know, has been at the forefront of the COVID discussions. The company is required to carry out a full documented risk assessment for all projects' production processes which involve the use of hazardous chemicals and materials. Again, the onus is on the company to actually identify the hazardous chemicals that they are using. There's no point being brought to task because they've been using a chemical which they weren't aware of was hazardous. And these document risk assessments have to be readily available for referral in the event of a spillage. Spillage protection kit have got to be available. Quite a few of my companies, one of their biggest risks is delivery lorries actually spilling diesel, which then gets into the watercourse. They have to actually provide spill kits around the areas where it's possible for spillage to leak into. Environmental permitting regulations. These apply to anybody who is likely to discharge any trade effluent into any watercourse, ponds or lakes. This is true not only of businesses, but of farmers and any other organisation that is spreading chemicals on the land. Companies are forbidden to discharge their trade effluent, whether it's poisonous or polluted material, or even solid waste, into any controlled water unless a permit has been obtained from the Environment Agency. And the Environment Agency is actually very strict on issuing these permits. Any material which can damage or poison local fauna and flora is also covered by the regulations. I got personal memory of this. The company I used to work for, Morganite Crucible, we were discharging control levels of borax into the local water. And then, unfortunately, we had an occasion where the level got above the permitted level. And we actually ended up killing a whole load of farms, fields of lettuces as a result of this. We were not very popular. And also, we were brought to task by Severn Trent Water for doing it. Waste, electrical and electronic equipment regulation. I've just got to notice my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you can still hear me. These regulations cover the recycling. Yeah, they cover the recycling, reuse and disposal of all electrical and electronic equipment. Businesses that use EEE must only transfer waste EE to a registered waste carrier or other approved person or business. They must ask for and get a waste transfer note covering the transfer of the waste electronic equipment, and that the waste electronic equipment is taken to a suitable site for recycling or disposal. They have to retain proof of disposal of the waste electronic equipment. And when they purchase new electronic equipment, they must obtain the producer registration records. And these are the traceability information to do with that equipment. Energy performance of building regulations. These regulations concern such things as heat loss from the buildings. Are the walls and glass areas insulated sufficiently to meet the current building regulations? Is energy efficient lighting such as LED installed, and is there a control system in place for switching off electrical equipment when not in use? LED lighting is more and more becoming the norm for factory lighting. The improvement in quality from LED lighting in the last 2 to 3 years has been tremendous, and I recommend now to any company that is not using LED lighting to switch, even though they may find it a little bit expensive to start with. Not only are they helping the energy regulations, but they actually will save up to 30% of their electricity consumption. Companies that use aircon equipment, if they're using powered more than 12 kilowatts, they'll need to have the equipment regularly maintained by a third party. The F-gas regulations. These regulations principally apply to businesses that use any aircon or refrigeration equipment which contains fluorocarbon-based cooling gases. These are the gases that affect the ozone layer in the atmosphere, and there's been very strict control of those over the last few years. And in recent times, these have been replaced by more environmentally friendly gases. But they also cover heat pumps, which is an area which is growing in popularity. And also some firefighting equipment contains F-gas. Here the requirement is for the business owners to regularly check the equipment for leakage and actually record that they've checked it. They must only use certified F-gas technicians to repair leaks and replace any cooling gas. That technician does have to have a qualified certificate that he can actually deal with F-gases. Waste regulations. All types of waste companies are required to apply the waste hierarchy where feasible. And this is the old sort of tree, prevent the waste being generated in the first place. In most cases, that's easier said than done. If they can reuse the waste on site, then prepare it in a form that they can reuse it. If possible, recycling the waste. If it's not in their processes, they may have other businesses that can use that waste. Also, recovery of waste energy is a key area of waste regulations. So a lot of companies are now using the waste heat to heat low, even office areas or low temperature dryers. Anything where you can use the waste heat, then that is demonstrated to be a benefit. But disposal of waste should be a last resort. Fire safety regulations. A responsible person must be appointed to carry out a fire risk assessment. They must have procedures in place to organise training for their staff. And this should include fire marshals, how people get out of the building in the event of a fire. They must carry out regular fire drills and keep records of these drills. Quite surprised how many times I visit clients who, yes, they've done a fire drill in the last 12 months, but there's no record. There's not even a record that they checked everybody who actually got out of the building. It's a requirement that they actually record these details. And one of my companies actually failed their ISO 14001 for that very reason. They must have clear means of escape through signed escape doors. How often I find that somebody has stored something against a fire door. That is not only dangerous, but it's illegal. They must have notice of informed actions to be taken in the event of fire, where the fire hazards are, what they should do in the event of fire, where the fire alarms are. So they all know what action to take when they leave. And also, very important, because very often fire damages the electricity supply, provide emergency lighting for fire alarms and fire extinguishers. I was going to go potential improvement targets. To meet the requirements of ISO 14001, companies have to set themselves at least 2 improvement targets as far as the environment is concerned. And these can cover such areas as reducing travel to customers or suppliers. And I've been asking for this for several years now, using audio video conferencing. Suddenly, the light has dawned for a lot of my clients that actually not only is it going to be beneficial, but they actually have more time to spend on their other business. Mm. Planning custom deliveries to minimise fuel usage, quite important. And I see a lot of this now with delivery lorries, actually planning to their deliveries, so they minimise the amount of distance they have to travel to do those deliveries. A couple of my clients have got trackers with their vehicles where they can actually redirect a delivery driver if there's an urgent delivery prior to when they would normally need it. Installation of alternative energy sources such as solar panel, wind turbines on site, even air source heat pumps now becoming popular. Replacing paper-based design facilities with a design portal for design teams to access. One of my clients has actually gone over to this in the last few weeks, just before the lockdown. And it's been a tremendous benefit for him because prior to that, his design engineers would have had to have visited the sites to actually get the information. Now the information is available online. And reducing or reusing a portion of the process scrap and waste. Again, waste reduction is not only an ISO 14001 target, it can also make a lot of money for clients. I had a transport company that didn't recycle their batteries from their lorries. They now recycle all those batteries. Not only are they more environmentally friendly, but they're actually saving quite a lot of money as a result of recycling. It used to be a case that they'd leave them in an area on the site and the gypsies would come over the wall at the weekend and take them home with them. So that has been a considerable benefit.